It began with a utensil, not a clash of words, not an alarming vibration from a phone, nor even an outright fabrication, just a solitary fork, mine, clattering to the polished marble floor of a dining room set for 10. Daria didn't notice. Her laughter, a bright melodic sound, soared over the hum of the gathering, fueled by whatever secret Sterling had just murmured in her ear. Every other guest, however, cast a quick glance my way. I offered an awkward, tight-lipped smile, bent down, retrieved the errant silverware, and meticulously wiped it with my napkin, feigning indifference. Yet within my chest, something irrevocably fractured. It was the city's annual charity gala, one of those ostentatious evenings laden with protracted speeches, lukewarm table wine, and a sprawling crowd of individuals meticulously rehearsing their concern for obscure local initiatives. Daria Lennox, my wife, had insisted on my presence, reiterating its crucial importance that I be seen tonight. What I failed to grasp, what she never articulated, was that she intended me to be seen by someone else. I had never considered myself the jealous type. Not of Sterling Stone, not of his easy, confident smirk, not of his hand, lingering on Daria's arm as if it were its rightful place, and certainly not of the casual way she allowed it to remain. They'd first crossed paths during the gala's planning stages. He was lending his talents, a vague descriptor I never quite parsed. I'd made an effort to track the narrative when Daria first recounted their meeting weeks prior, but all that truly registered was the incessant praise. How genuinely amusing he was, how remarkably cool, how refreshingly uncomplicated. Now I observed them across the table, their heads tilted in a conspiratorial intimacy, reminiscent of teenagers sharing a clandestine joke at a concert. Suddenly, the drone of the keynote speech, barely 5 feet away, became utterly inaudible. All that registered was the frantic, accusatory drumbeat of my own heart. It was loud. It was angry. It was undeniably pathetic. Then, as if on cue, the music swelled, some saccharine, smooth jazz number that prompted a ripple of polite applause. Couples rose, chairs scraped a symphony of discontent across the floor. The bandleader offered a charming, practiced platitude. I remained seated, still clutching my napkin, the tarnished fork a forgotten burden within its folds. Sterling, a picture of effortless grace, stood, turned to Daria, and extended his hand. She didn't hesitate. She rose, her fingers intertwining with his, not once glancing my way, not bothering to inquire if I wished to dance, not even acknowledging my presence. I watched her drift toward the dance floor with him, her sapphire gown shimmering like liquid moonlight, as if she were floating. This was her night. He was her companion. Heads turned, eyes followed their elegant sway. They were magnetic. I was entirely, painfully invisible. The couple beside me, a picture of geniality, beamed. "You must be so proud," the woman chirped. I nodded, the words catching in my throat like a shard of glass. Then without a word, I rose and walked out. No dramatic scene, no indignant storming off. Just gone. I covered 2 silent blocks before the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of footsteps pounded behind me. She had followed, barefoot, her heels clutched in one hand, her chest heaving, as if she'd just completed a grueling marathon. "Malcolm, what on earth are you doing?" Her voice was a strained whisper. I turned, finally uttering the only unvarnished truth I'd spoken all evening. "Allowing you the night you so clearly desired." Her face, usually so composed, crumpled. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, genuine guilt flickered in her eyes. But it was too late, because for one protracted evening, she had made me feel utterly, completely expendable. There she stood, barefoot in the cool night air, delicate heels swinging from her fingers, makeup pristine, yet her expression fractured, bewildered. I'd never seen Daria Lennox look so disoriented, as if I were the one who had committed a betrayal by walking away. It would have been comical had the pain not been so acute. "You just left?" she gasped, still breathless. "In the middle of everything?" I kept my voice level, though my insides churned like a tempest. "Yes, actually, in the middle of being utterly ignored. I figured no one would notice." She rolled her eyes, a classic Daria maneuver, her go-to deflection, whenever I broached anything remotely uncomfortable. Malcolm, I was networking. You understand how critical tonight was? Sterling is, if you dare say just a friend, I swear to God, I interjected, my voice a low growl. The words struck their mark. She faltered, her mouth opening, then closing, unable to decide whether to launch into a defense or offer a belated apology. She chose neither. You're overreacting, she finally declared. We dance, that's all. It's a fundraiser. People were watching. Exactly, I countered. People were watching, and you acted as if you weren't married. She crossed her arms, a familiar shield. So this is it? You storm off into the night, make me look like a lunatic chasing after you, and now you want to make a scene? No, I said quietly, the word cutting through the tension. That's what you wanted. That's why you made certain everyone saw you dancing with him. That's why you laughed like I ceased to exist. She recoiled as if physically struck by my words. For a fleeting second, I thought she might cry. But Daria never cries in public, not unless it guarantees a surge of sympathy. Instead, she straightened her spine, her jaw tightening, and uttered words I never imagined I'd hear from her lips. Perhaps you're just not exciting enough to keep up anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout she could have unleashed. I truly looked at her then and saw a stranger inhabiting the woman I married. Someone who desperately craved to be seen, yes, but not by me. I'll call a cab, I said, stepping away, turning my back. She didn't stop me. She didn't call out this time, just stood there on the sidewalk, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. I rode home alone, the city lights blurring into streaks. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at our wedding photograph, the faces in it appearing as unfamiliar as ghosts. She didn't return for hours. When she did, she bypassed the bedroom entirely, settling onto the living room couch, feigning sleep until morning. By the time I emerged, she was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, an unsettling charade of normalcy. Want a cup? She asked, her voice light, devoid of any residue from the night before. I shook my head. We didn't discuss it. Not that day, not the next. But something had fundamentally shifted. The silence between us was no longer companionable. It was a buzzing, heavy, sharp entity, a presence all its own. Then came the messages. Not from her, but from an unknown number. Always late at night, always concise, always chillingly detached. You okay? You deserve better. If you ever want to talk. No name, but the tone, the casual concern, was unmistakable. Sterling. And in that moment, I knew with a dreadful certainty that the dance had been far more than just a dance. I didn't confront her immediately. Perhaps it was fear of what I already knew. Perhaps a sliver of me clung to the hope that I was being paranoid, overthinking, overfeeling, over everything. What if the truth was far uglier than my imagination? But when someone texts you at 1:17 a.m. with, "You deserve better," you cease granting them the benefit of the doubt. Still, I observed, I watched her for a few days. Daria didn't exhibit the typical signs of someone embroiled in an affair. She wasn't giggly, wasn't nervous. If anything, she was colder, more distant than usual. Yet her phone lay face down more frequently, a new habit, and she'd started wearing that particular perfume again, the expensive, heady scent she swore she'd outgrown years ago. Twice she returned home with her lipstick smudged unevenly, blaming it on a wine night with the girls. I nodded, feigning acceptance, but the seeds of disbelief had already taken root, blooming into an undeniable suspicion. It was the following Thursday when the dam finally broke. I was attempting to fix the bedroom radiator, because of course the heating decided to fail in the one room we still consistently shared, and she was in the shower. Her phone chimed, then chimed again, then buzzed incessantly, a frantic, trapped insect. I can't pinpoint the exact impulse that drove me. Perhaps I was simply exhausted from feeling like a ghost haunting my own marriage. But I picked it up. I unlocked it. Yes, I knew the code. And navigated to her messages. There he was. Sterling, not even bothering to conceal his identity. The last few exchanges twisted my stomach into knots. You looked incredible tonight. I can't stop replaying your laugh. He didn't even notice, did he? Poor guy. Next time, wear the blue one. You know why? That final message was time-stamped 3 minutes ago, while I sat mere feet away, while she hummed in the shower we still shared. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I simply stared at the illuminated screen as if it were an inferno, debating whether to leap in or turn and walk away. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a fluffy towel, humming a tuneless melody, utterly oblivious to the catastrophe she just detonated, I merely held the phone up, offering no words. Her face froze. Her carefully constructed smile vanished as if a switch had been flicked. She didn't deny it. She didn't scramble for excuses or spin a desperate fabrication. She simply met my gaze and said, her voice unnervingly flat, "You weren't supposed to see that." Not, "It's not what it looks like." Not, "I can explain." Just that, as if the sole error was my discovery. "You weren't supposed to see that." She sat on the edge of the bed as though we were about to commence a tedious meeting. I remained standing, phone still in hand, my pulse thrumming in my ears like a desperate drum. "How long?" I managed, the words a strained whisper. "A few months," she replied, as casually as admitting to a parking violation. "It's not like I planned it," I laughed, a dry, bitter sound I scarcely recognized as my own. "You planned a dance. You planned the dress. You planned every moment of that night. You even planned for me to watch." She flinched, just a fraction, but then her features hardened again. "You're not exciting, Malcolm. You never were. You stopped trying. I grew weary of being the only one feeling anything. I yearned to shout, to shatter something, to scream that I had been trying, that I had always been there, and that perhaps if she hadn't treated me like an inconsequential accessory for years, I wouldn't be standing here, holding tangible proof that I never truly mattered at all. But I didn't. I said nothing. I simply picked up my jacket, walked out the front door, and drove aimlessly for hours, that final message glowing in my mind like a neon sign. Next time, wear the blue one. I didn't seek refuge in a hotel that night. I didn't crash at a friend's place or sleep in my car like some melodramatic film character. Instead, I parked at a quiet waterfront lookout behind our neighborhood, turned off the engine, and sat for hours in absolute silence, accompanied only by the soft ticking of the dashboard clock and the dull, incessant echo of betrayal rattling within my skull. I wasn't contemplating revenge, not yet. I was still suspended between sheer disbelief and that hollow, aching sickness that takes root when the person you trusted most becomes the very reason you can no longer sleep. I must have replayed her words 50 times in my head. "You weren't supposed to see that." Not "I'm sorry," not "it was a mistake." Just profound disappointment that I had disrupted her clandestine world. Around 3:01 a.m., I finally drove back. I didn't expect to find her awake, but there she was, perched on the living room couch in the gloom, her phone in her hand, that cursed blue dress draped casually over the armrest. I didn't utter a word. I simply walked past her and into the bedroom. She didn't follow. The next morning, she acted as if we'd merely had a spat, not a fracture, not an explosion. She asked if I wanted coffee. I declined. She left for work, her heels clicking across the hardwood floor like a volley of gunshots. That's when the realization hit me. I had been sharing a life with a stranger who wore my ring and smiled for the cameras, a stranger who danced with another man as if I were already dead. So, I began to plan. Not for revenge, but for clarity. First, I meticulously backed up everything. Phone records, message threads, screenshots. I forwarded them to my personal email and saved them onto a secure flash drive. I copied our joint bank statements too. It turned out she'd been making regular cash withdrawals. Nothing overtly significant, just enough to avoid suspicion, yet consistent, as if she were preparing for something, as if she already had. Then I ascended to the attic. We stored an old keepsake bin up there, a relic from our early years. Photo albums, handwritten letters, trivial mementos we'd vowed never to discard. I sifted through every photograph, every faded note. All I could see now were the portents. How she subtly leaned away from me in group shots, how her gaze invariably drifted towards someone else in the background. I had convinced myself we were an unshakable unit, but the truth, a chilling premonition, had been there all along, buried within the very images I believed proved our happiness. Next, I quietly consulted with a lawyer. I sought no melodrama, only methodical preparation. He was calm, professional, outlining my options, inquiring about a prenuptial agreement. There wasn't one. That evening, I returned home early. Daria wasn't back yet. I sat at the kitchen table, my eyes fixed on the blue dress, still hanging casually from the bedroom closet door. It was the one she'd worn to her sister's wedding 2 years prior. Sterling had never seen it then. That meant she'd worn it for him, recently. On a night she had lied to my face. She arrived home around 9. The scent of expensive wine and an unfamiliar rich soap preceded her. She spotted me at the table and sighed, a weary breath that suggested she'd been steeling herself for this inevitable confrontation. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, but I wouldn't allow her the first word. "I know about the money you've been withdrawing. I know about the messages. I know about Sterling. And I've spoken to a lawyer." Her eyes widened just for a fleeting half-second, then narrowed to slits. "You're overreacting," she repeated, clinging to the only script she knew. "It's not that serious." "You're right," I said, rising from my chair. "It's far more serious than you imagine." And with that, I walked out again. Only this time, it wasn't a retreat. It was the definitive beginning of something I should have initiated years ago. Choosing myself. I didn't vacate the apartment immediately. My instinct urged me to, but something deeper prompted me to wait. Not out of fear or indecision, but because I knew she was still operating under a pretense. Daria believed she had time. She imagined I would eventually calm down, retreat into my customary silence, and simply move on. That was her constant expectation, that I would bite my tongue, broker peace, and ultimately forget. But what if this time, the script flipped completely? 2 days after our last terse conversation, she extended an invitation to dinner. Not at some trendy restaurant, but at home. She'd even prepared a risotto, grilled salmon, candles strategically placed on the table. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup subtle yet deliberate, and that same sapphire gown, the one he had instructed her to wear, was back on. It made my stomach churn. "I wanted us to have a nice night," she said as I entered, her voice carefully modulated. "No drama, just talk." I sat quietly, distrusting my own voice. She poured wine. I politely declined. She smiled anyway, then began, delicately cutting into her salmon as if nothing tumultuous had transpired between us. "I was thinking," she mused, "maybe we could escape for a weekend. Just us. Clear our heads." I stared at her. She was attempting a factory reset, as if she'd dropped a priceless vase, and simply hoped to glue the pieces back together before anyone noticed the irreparable cracks. There was no apology, no genuine explanation, merely a meticulously staged performance. "I know things became tense," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But people make mistakes, and if we're both willing to work at this—" "I'm not," I interrupted, her knife freezing mid-slice. "I'm not willing," I reiterated calmly, "because you didn't make a mistake. You made a series of deliberate choices, repeatedly." Her lips parted as if to mount a defense, but I gave her no quarter. "You danced with him in front of me, you messaged him behind my back, you lied to my face, and you still wore that dress to my table. You're not sorry, Daria. You're merely trying to manage the fallout." She pushed back her chair with a sharp scrape. "You're being cruel now." "No," I countered, my voice steady. "You were cruel. I'm simply done pretending you weren't." She stood and retreated from the table, pacing like a restless, caged animal. "So what? You're just going to throw this all away?" I laughed, a bitter hollow sound. "You already did, Daria." Then came the subtle shift, the tremor in her voice. The sliver of panic she'd meticulously suppressed finally leaked through. "Okay, look," she said, turning back towards me, arms crossed like a defensive barrier. "It wasn't serious. I didn't sleep with him. We just connected. It felt nice to be seen." It was her carefully sanitized version of a confession, polished, self-deluding, and ultimately safe, still clinging to the role of the victim. You wanted to be seen, I repeated, each word landing like a small stone. So you publicly humiliated me in front of everyone. Her prolonged silence spoke volumes. The next morning, she awoke to a folded note on her nightstand. I was no longer in the apartment. I hadn't delivered a grand speech or a dramatic, tear-filled goodbye. Just a simple, stark message. You've been seen too. By everyone. Good luck explaining it. Attached to the note was a USB drive. Inside, screenshots of her illicit texts, an audio clip from the night of the gala. I had discreetly recorded the background band, inadvertently capturing a snippet of her flirtatious laughter with Sterling. Nothing explicit, but enough to utterly shatter the carefully curated image she'd painstakingly constructed for herself. The loyal, diligent wife who merely sought support. I didn't send it to her boss. I didn't post it online. I sent it to her sister, Hannah Zola, her famously judgmental, notoriously talkative sister. By noon, I had 3 missed calls from Daria, 2 increasingly frantic voicemails, and a string of texts that cycled from guilt-tripping to desperate pleas for forgiveness. But I didn't answer any of them, because I was already driving out of the city, heading somewhere quieter, somewhere honest. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think, and what I heard was this: I deserve more than being a forgotten footnote in my own marriage. 2 days. That's how swiftly the dominoes began to fall. Not because I created a public spectacle, not because I exposed her to the wider world. All I did was send that unassuming USB drive to her sister, and that, it turned out, was more than enough to ignite the first spark. Daria had meticulously built her reputation like a delicate house of cards. The perfect wife, the exemplary employee, the quintessential social butterfly. But what if one small breeze of truth could bring the entire facade crashing down? The first tangible hint of the fallout arrived as a forwarded message from Hannah, who, incidentally, had never particularly cared for me until that precise moment. It was a screenshot of a group chat titled Volunteer Committee Gala 2025. Someone had typed, "I think Malcolm left early because of Daria. Did you see the way she was dancing with that guy? Totally disrespectful." Another replied, "She always said Malcolm was too boring for her. Guess she really meant it." I didn't respond. I merely read the thread, letting the raw reality sink in. Daria had always craved attention, but she had never considered the catastrophic consequences if that spotlight were to turn against her. By the afternoon, she called. I watched the screen ring, then ring again, then saw the voicemail icon appear. "Malcolm, I don't know what you told Hannah, but this has spiraled completely out of control. People are whispering. I walked into the office this morning and everyone went utterly silent. I don't deserve this. Please call me." I didn't call. Instead, I checked into a modest cabin upstate, one of those idyllic, secluded spots by a tranquil lake, devoid of Wi-Fi and with patchy cell reception. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about breathing. I hadn't realized how little oxygen I'd been truly inhaling until I finally stepped away from her suffocating orbit. That first night in the cabin, I slept for 10 uninterrupted hours. No gnawing anxiety, no creeping dread, no torturous wondering when the next deception would find me. Back in the city, however, she was steadily unraveling. Hannah, a surprisingly effective informant, texted me updates I hadn't requested. "She's blaming you for absolutely everything. Says you're twisting the truth. But honestly, after seeing those messages, I'm fully on your side now. Took me long enough, huh?" A faint smile touched my lips at that. Then came the most unexpected message of all, from Sterling. It was remarkably short. "Didn't realize she was still married. My bad." That was it. No apology, no discernible remorse, just a casual acknowledgement that he'd inadvertently stumbled into someone else's marital wreckage and desired no further involvement. A part of me yearned to reply, to unleash a torrent of anger, to call him every derogatory name imaginable. But what was the point? He wasn't the root cause of the rot. He was merely the match. Daria had doused everything in gasoline long before he ever appeared. On the 4th night at the cabin, I finally answered her call. I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps I needed to hear what new excuse she would attempt to conjure. Her voice was quieter than usual. Not soft, but profoundly exhausted. Malcolm, I miss you. Please come home. That place isn't my home anymore, Daria, I said, my voice calm, resolute. I know I messed up. Okay, I do. But we can fix this. We always do. No, I corrected. You bury it, then wait for me to forget. That isn't fixing. That's mere survival. And I'm done surviving. She was silent for a long moment, the crackle of the phone line the only sound. I never meant to hurt you. Yeah, I said, a dry, weary truth. That's the fundamental problem. You didn't mean to. You just didn't care if you did. Before she could formulate a reply, I ended the call. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt like the definitive, quiet thud of a door closing, permanently. The next morning, I began drafting my formal separation papers. There was no fanfare, no last-ditch letters, just a clean, sharp break from the woman who danced like I didn't exist and only remembered me when the applause for her finally died. The first week after I officially filed the papers, I anticipated a kind of cinematic relief, a dramatic lifting of a colossal weight, a sudden clearing of the suffocating fog, a feeling of being completely whole again. But that's simply not how it works. Not when you've spent nearly a decade meticulously shrinking yourself to maintain someone else's comfort. Not when you've painstakingly learned to measure your own worth in fleeting eye contact and meager scraps of attention. Freedom, it turned out, was surprisingly quiet, almost uncomfortably so. Up at the cabin, the silence was absolute. No familiar footsteps in the hallway, no lingering traces of her perfume in the bathroom, no petty arguments about the precise shade of white our curtains should be. Just me, the shimmering lake, and the peculiar sensation that I was waiting for a sound I no longer wished to hear. I wasn't grieving the loss of Daria. I was grieving the profound illusion that I had ever truly possessed her in the first place. Then, out of the blue, an unexpected message appeared from an unknown number. At first, I assumed it was Daria again, operating under a different guise. But it wasn't. It was from Jensen Davies, my oldest friend. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years, not since Daria had accused him of being inappropriate at a dinner party, an accusation I now realized was likely just another tactic she employed to isolate me from anyone who saw the truth too clearly. The message read, I heard about what happened. I should have said something back then. Can we talk? We met at a classic diner, precisely halfway between the city and the cabin. It felt surreal seeing him again. He looked exactly the same, effortlessly Jensen, but I knew I didn't. I had aged in places no one could see. You look better, he observed after a long, comfortable silence. Tired, but better. I feel empty, I admitted, a stark truth. That's how healing often feels at first, he said gently. It's like your brain doesn't know what to do with all the extra room. We talked for hours about Daria, about that specific night she had declared he'd crossed a line, about her ingrained pattern of dissembling, twisting narratives, transforming friends into strangers if they dared approach the truth too closely. He even confessed that she had flirted with him once, just enough to blur the boundaries, then expertly pulled back, leaving him feeling utterly guilty. And I, in my blindness, had believed her when she insisted he was the problem. That conversation achieved something I hadn't anticipated. It didn't just confirm my deepest fears. It gifted me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Undeniable clarity. That night I returned to the cabin. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't spiral into self-pity. I sat by the lake, mesmerized by the moonlight dancing on the water, and realized something profoundly wild. I was still here. She hadn't destroyed me. She had merely exposed what I desperately needed to see to finally rebuild. The next morning I received one final letter from her, handwritten, as if attempting to reclaim sincerity after the failures of digital communication. It stated she missed me, that she was truly sorry, that she no longer recognized herself. But here's what genuinely shocked me. She didn't ask me to return. She knew it was over. Finally, fully, completely. She ended with, "You deserve someone who danced only with you." I'm sorry I forgot that. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer of my nightstand, and never opened it again. Because I already possessed everything I needed. Not revenge, not a performative apology. just a profound, quiet peace, and the kind of silence that no longer felt empty, but deeply, richly earned. 6 months later, I barely recognized my own life, and for once that wasn't a cause for alarm. The divorce finalized quietly, sans courtroom dramatics or last-minute desperate confessions. Daria retained the luxurious condo. I didn't contest it. The thought of spending another night under that roof, surrounded by furniture chosen for superficial appearances and memories I no longer trusted, was unbearable. I walked away with my name, my sanity, and something I hadn't genuinely felt in years. The expansive, exhilarating space to become an entirely new version of myself. I moved into a smaller place, nestled closer to the lake. Nothing extravagant, a single bedroom, old creaky floors, a front porch with peeling paint, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture I selected was chosen for comfort, not for show. There were no staged photos on the mantelpiece, just a few well-loved books, some old records, and a profound silence that now felt like a warm, comforting embrace instead of an isolating cage. Then something utterly unexpected happened. I joined a local community book club. I know not exactly the stuff of thrilling narratives, but I reasoned that if I truly wanted a fresh start, I needed to step beyond the confines of my new home. That first night, I arrived late and awkward, nearly turning back when I saw the lively, animated group. I didn't feel like I belonged until someone chuckled at a half-mumbled joke I made under my breath. Her name was Alana. Not flashy, not loud, simply present. The way she listened was a kind of quiet superpower, making you feel as if you were the only voice in the entire room, and every word you spoke mattered. We didn't stumble into anything dramatic. No grand, sweeping romance. Just two individuals connecting in a quiet space, asking genuine questions, sharing honest answers. One evening, I confided everything. The dancing, the lies, the infamous blue dress. I half expected her to shift uncomfortably, perhaps offer pity, but she simply nodded, her kind eyes unwavering, and said, "You didn't lose her, Malcolm. You found yourself." And that's when the profound truth finally settled in. It wasn't about being desperately seen by someone else. It was, and had always been, about finally seeing myself. Not as the quiet husband, not as the forgotten figure lurking in the corner of the dance floor, but as someone who deserved to take up space, to be unequivocally chosen, to never again settle for being treated like an inconsequential shadow. Looking back, that night Daria danced with Sterling as if I ceased to exist. That, in its own twisted way, was the very night I finally began to live.